Hi everyone. The lesson is classes and objects part 4 methods continuation. So it's the continuation from part 3 methods. We are continuing into part 4 methods. So we are discussing further about methods. So it's a continuation of the previous lesson. We'll be using Xcode version 11.6 and Apple Developer Docs and API for referencing. You need to make sure you look at the previous lesson, which is classes and objects part 3 methods. You can find the link to the previous lesson in the description section. We'll be learning about parameters and returning values. As usual, we are going to do practical demonstrations. So let's start Xcode. Let's create a new project. Make sure it's macOS command line tool selected, not iOS single view app, macOS command line tool. Click next. Let's say it's example 1. Make sure the language is Objective-C. Click next and then make sure that you have selected wherever you want to save it, whatever the location of your choice. So for this exercise, I'm going to create a class. We will be creating a class. We are going to create a class. So I'm going to create a class called calculator for this exercise. So right click and let's say a new file. You have seen how we did this in our previous lessons. So you select Coco class, click next. Let's say you want the class to be calculator, and it's a subclass of NS object, language is Objective-C. Click next and say create. Awesome. So you got the calculator.h. Now, as you know, you can declare properties and methods. That's what we have done up to now. So for this exercise, I'm going to create a method. Now you remember how we created methods because we did it in the last class. You will put minus or plus. Minus is for instance methods, plus is for class methods. So far, we have discussed only instance methods. So I will just put minus because we have discussed only instance methods so far. Then you open brackets and put your return type. Let's say the return type is void. So that means you are not returning any value. Now you can give the name of the method. So you know that we discussed this in the previous lesson. And if there are no parameters, you will just put a semicolon. So this is how you declare a normal method. Then you copy it. Then you will go to the .m file where you have the implementation, and then you will implement it in the implementation file. So this is what you know up to now. And let's say, because it's add method, let's say I want to add two numbers. Let's say number 1, right? For example, say number 1 is 10. Let's say number 2 is 5. And let's say answer is equal to number 1 plus number 2, right? So number 1 and number 2 are local variables. They are not properties or they are not instance variables. They are local variables because you declare them inside a method. They become local variables. Okay, and then let's say in this case either I can use nslog or printf, doesn't matter, as because we have been using nslogs, we'll just put nslog and we'll say answer is equal to, okay, let's say comma answer, right? And then you need to give the format specifier. So it's an integer, so let's say percentage %d, right? And then string literals must always be prefixed with the @ symbol. Okay, now you know how to call the method as well. So after you do these two, you will be going to the main method. Let's say you say starting the calculator, right? Now you all know that you have to create an object. So the class is calculator, it's in calculator.h. So the interface, so you have to import the interface calculator. So you have to import it wherever you want to declare an object. So import calculator, and then the class name is so the interface is calculator. For the interface for the class here is the calculator. So you'll declare an object of the interface pointer c1. Then from the previous lessons, you know that you have to allocate memory by passing the method alloc, and on the return raw object, you know that on top of that you have to again call another method. That is why I am again putting square brackets, which is init method. So now you got a object, then you know how to call the methods because you put the object and then you call the message. So the message is the method name in the interface, which is in this case add. So because of that, you will just call add over here. So let's run this. So what should happen is it creates object of calculator and then it calls the add method, and add method is a instance method, and the implementation says when you call that it has to add two numbers. So it should work. Let's click the run button. Let's make some space. First place, let's run. You should see the add method getting executed, right? Okay, let's see the output. You see it works. It says answer is 15. I will show it to you. Now if you don't call the add method, so if I comment this line, so you can put 2/ and comment. When you comment, the line will not work. If you run this, it will say only starting. It's not showing the answer because I'm not calling the method. But if I call it again, calling means you have to pass the message to the object. That is what you say calling the method here. Then when you pass, it executes the method. When this object receives this message add, it will execute the relevant method, which is the add method, right? And that's how we get this output. So this is how you basically call a method which you are aware. Now let's go to the next step, which is parameter passing. Now if I want to call this method again like this for the second time, what's happening here is it's adding the same pair of numbers. If I'm calling again, basically you're adding the same pair of numbers, so it's always the same. But let's say each time I call the method, I want to add different pairs of numbers. So to achieve this, you will be doing this using parameter passing. So that means I have to declare parameters into the method. So how do you declare parameters? So if you look at the developer docs, you can see methods can take parameters. So this is how you do it in C language. You will just declare the function, open brackets, then put some data type and a value, the variable parameter. So in Objective-C, you do it this way. You know, this is what you did up to now. So after the method name, you will put a colon, and then you will put the data type within brackets and the value. So if I take it carefully, if I copy this to show it to you, and if I take you here, if I put it down, so let's look here. So it's good to keep a space, clarity. So some method, right? Some method, okay, it says with value. So some method with value. What does that mean? It's like a naming convention, right? So it says some method with first value, right? With number 1 or add. So it's like a naming convention, right? So let's look into this. Let me further elaborate it a little bit. So to elaborate this, let me first do it now. So some method with a value. So that is the add method, right? And then colon. So if I put this part, so this is the add method. If I bring it here, so now if I delete it, so some type. So that means the parameter. Let's say int, right? And the value. Okay, the value. So let's say number 1, right? So which means you are passing integer parameter to the add method. That is what's happened here, right? So this is how you pass parameters, right? So then when you declare the method, you put that, once again you put the same thing over there, right? Okay, so let's dig into this. Right, now, so you got the parameter declared, right? So in that case, now you have a method with a parameter called number 1, right? So which means now, so you don't have to declare it again here, right? So that's the meaning. So what it means is now you can get this number 1 as a parameter. So I will just keep only number 2 to say that when you get the answer, you can now calculate the answer with number 1, which is the parameter, and number 2, which is the local variable. So then the rest is the same. So this is how you pass a parameter. So this is how you declare a parameter, right? Then how do you pass it? That is when you call the method. So now when you call the method, for the add method, you put a colon and you can pass the parameter value. So over here, to the add method, you can put a colon and then pass the parameter value. Say some parameter, say 10 for example. Then over here, once again, say colon, some value, let's say, I don't know, any value, say 50. Let's say add, I'm just giving example, let's say another value, let's say, I don't know, 15, right? So the first value will, the parameter will be 10. Then the second value is always 5 because I have declared it inside. So now the result, the output should be different. As you can see, the answer is 15. Why? Because I'm passing a parameter 10, which will be taken 10, and then the number 2 is 5. So number 1 is 10 plus 5, 15. That's why I'm getting 15. Then when I pass 50 here, the parameter will be 50. So for the second method call, number 1 will be 50. So 50 plus number 2 is always 5. 50 plus 5 is 55. That's why I'm getting the output 55. Same, I'm getting the other one. So this is how you basically pass a single parameter, right? Now the naming convention in Objective-C is you usually tend to give what the parameter name is in the method name itself, right? For example, see, it says some method with first value, or some method is add with first value means like number 1. So it's like a naming convention. So it's not a rule. As you saw, it worked. So if I'm following this rule, so it means something like this. So it's to make it more readable. So it's like add with, what's the first value? Let's say add with number 1, right? So it's a naming convention so that someone looking at this public interface will see, okay, it's adding, okay, and then it's adding with, say, number 1, and so that it's like a naming, and the parameter will be number 1. So in that case, this is like a good, better naming convention. So it's add with number 1. So someone calling will always see it as not as add, because you will get error now because there is no add method, right? Because now it is add with number 1, right? Because in the signature you have given it as add with number 1. So if I try to run this, I should get a error because there's no method. So the method is, once again, if I show it to you, it's add with number 1, and see, it shows you the parameter as int, right? The parameter int. So add with number 1 int. So here I can pass the first number, right? And then over here, once again, it's not add, right? So it's add with number 1. So in this case, the number 1 is 50. But keep in mind, this is just a good naming convention, right? Add with number 1, right? This is just a good naming convention. So now if I run this, it works. Output is the same, but it's a good naming now. So now you know, at the end of this lesson, you know how to create a method with parameters. So this is how you declare a method with parameters. You will put the method name and you will give something meaningful to say what's the first parameter. Then you put a colon and you put the parameter type and the parameter name, and then you implement it. So in this case, I'm dealing only with one parameter, right? Okay, so let's see what's next. So we successfully completed the practical demonstration about using parameters. So the conclusion is you learn about passing parameters, and so in the next lesson we will learn about passing multiple parameters and also about returning values. We use Apple Developer Docs and for references. Have a look at our other videos for practicals on Objective-C. So we are very excited to see you in the next lesson. We'll see you in the next lesson.